I once believed in destiny, in purpose, in the radiant glory of mankind's ascension among the stars. We all did back then, those of us who marched beneath golden aquilus, ceramite armor gleaming with borrowed holiness. We thought ourselves chosen, weapons of a just God. None are more deeply damned than those who once believed themselves holy. The change began in my left hand. A small thing at first, easy to ignore amid the rigors of war. My finger joints stiffened, the skin hardened, roughening like bark on some ancient withered tree. I hid it for 17 campaigns across 3-star systems. I had to. My brothers would have executed me without hesitation if they'd seen it. Genetic deviation is unforgivable among the Emperor's finest. I remember the weight of my chains word, the murderous vibration through the teeth as I took the heads of battle brothers who showed signs of corruption. How zealously I hunted those whose genetic purity faltered. I was their executioner. Now I look down at my own hands and see things that are no longer hands at all. Talons of crystal and shifting flesh that change shape every day. The meat beneath my gaze ripples in answer to thoughts I don't consciously form. The Iron Lord's chapter exists now, only in my memory. I abandoned their sigil the day I escaped into the screaming voids that swallowed my soul. 5 centuries have passed since I pledged myself to powers that promised deliverance. From mutation, from weakness, from decay. 5 centuries of blood and betrayal, of revelations that came screaming and of horrors endured in silence. They call us Chaos Space Marines, as if 2 words could encompass what we are, as if a name could contain the totality of our damnation. We who once were the Imperium's sword, now turned against the hand that forged us. We who bartered immortality for something far worse than death. I am Brother Raylan no longer. That name belongs to a dead man. A fool who believed he could bargain away gene corruption by kneeling to darker gods. The Black Legion welcomed me when I finally came to them. Their armor was already warped into nightmarish forms, their flesh long since surrendered to change. They spoke of glory, ascension, freedom from the hypocritical tyranny of the false emperor. They were generous with promises. They were less forthcoming about the price, the endless cost of chaos worship. So listen, mortal. Let me tell you of the long war. Let me speak of the cursed eternity awaiting those who surrender their humanity to the ruinous powers. Let me describe the slow dissolution of mind and flesh that no power armor can shield you from. Let me speak of hollow victories, of empty glory earned in service to gods who see their most devoted servants as toys to be broken and remade. This is my confession, my warning, my epitaph. Death will never claim me, but I am already a corpse, a walking remnant of something that once had purpose. Now I know only hunger, rage, and the mocking laughter of thirsty gods. This is the story of my damnation. The void invites you to witness it. I will begin with the day I died. My squad was deployed to the mining world of Karadesh, an unremarkable rock, modest industrial output, unexceptional piety. The kind of world the Imperium remembers only when its tithes falter. Reports of worker unrest had reached the nearby Iron Lord's garrison, whispers of strange symbols carved into rockcrete walls. Rumors of miners chanting forbidden verses in the deepest shafts. A standard heretical uprising, we were told. A standard compliance restoration mission. We made planetfall at dawn. 4 squads of tactical marines led by Chaplain Dorvis. The mining administrators greeted us with nervous reverence, guiding our Thunderhawk to the central processing facility. Their fear was thick on the air, not only fear of the heresy they reported, but fear of us, of what we might judge them to have allowed. Fear of punishment more than fear of sin. The disturbances began 3 months ago, my lords, the chief administrator stammered as he walked. Production quotas fell 7%. Workers reported nightmares. Machinery malfunctions tripled. Dorvis loomed over the man, skull helm betraying nothing. Show us where the symbols appeared. They led us through cramped corridors never meant to contain Astartes. My pauldrons scraped the walls, leaving gouges in the metal with each step. The administrators flinched at every shriek of ceramite against their infrastructure. Such is the burden of imperial worlds, to be ground down beneath the very boots sent to protect them. The first symbol appeared on a blast door leading to shaft 17. 8 arrows radiating from a central eye. Crude, but perfectly clear. The mark of chaos undivided, Dorvis said, his vox-augmented voice booming in the confined space. Who discovered this blasphemy? Shift Supervisor Kale, the administrator replied. He reported it immediately. We sealed the shaft. And where is this supervisor now? I asked. The administrator checked his data slate with trembling hands. According to the logs, he descended into shaft 17 2 days ago with a security team. They have not returned. Dorvis turned to us, his gaze sweeping over the assembled squads. Brother Raylan, take your men and secure the upper levels of the shaft. Brother Terrace, establish a perimeter around this facility. Brother Averick, interrogate all personnel who worked this section. Brother Carden, accompany me to the communication array. Chapter command must be updated. I nodded, cycling the action on my bolter. As you command, Chaplain. 4 battle brothers fell in behind me as we approached the sealed blast door. Our multi-spectrum Auspex readings showed movement below, but nothing we could classify. Mining facilities are always noisy with spurious data. Thermal fluctuations, dust, machinery echoes. The deep places of worlds are never entirely still. Prepare for breach, I ordered, placing melter charges at the door's weak points. Full auto-sense protocols. Assume warp contamination. The door vanished in a burst of superheated air and molten metal. We advanced through the glowing breach, bolters raised, helmet sensors compensating for the sudden darkness beyond. The shaft yawned beneath us, a vast vertical tunnel reinforced with metal struts and elevator rails. The platform at our level stood empty, littered with abandoned mining equipment and personal effects. Half-eaten rations. Data slates dropped mid-task. Lumen strips flickered weakly overhead. Brother Raylan, Vox reported over the squad channel. My Auspex is detecting multiple life signs 300 meters below. Numbers? I asked, stepping to the edge and peering down into the abyss. Indeterminate. Readings keep changing. That should have been our first warning. We descended by the maintenance ladders, servos whining as we controlled our fall. The air thickened as we went down, choked with metallic dust and something else, something coppery and sweet that even our armor's filters could not entirely remove. Blood. A great deal of it. 200 meters down, we found the first bodies. Security personnel lay sprawled across a platform, their flesh twisted into impossible geometries. Bones pushed through skin at angles that obeyed some cruel, precise logic. Their eyes had been replaced, each socket housing a geometrically perfect crystal that still tracked our movements. Throne preserve us, Brother Macros whispered. It was an uncharacteristic lapse of discipline. I chose to overlook it. They still live, Brother Karras said, his bolter trained on the nearest victim. Permission to grant the Emperor's mercy. I hesitated, studying the transformed humans. Their mutations were not random. There was pattern here, intention, design. This was not simple warp-spawned degradation. Negative, I said at last. We need intelligence, secure one for interrogation. That was my first mistake. The first in a chain of compromises that would end in my damnation. As Brother Karras approached the nearest victim, the crystalline eyes pulsed with cold inner light. A voice sounded, not from the ruined mouths, but from the air itself, as if reality had been split open to let it through. The Sons of Iron come to witness the change, it said. How appropriate, how symmetrical. I raised my bolter. Identify yourself, warp entity. The light flared again, and every corpse on the platform spoke in perfect unison. We are the revelation, the gateway, the mathematicians of flesh, your brothers in transformation. Heretics, I snarled. You have strayed from the Emperor's light. Laughter rolled through the air. coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The Emperor," the voice replied, "the great deceiver who hides the truth of what you are. Look upon our metamorphosis and see your future, Iron Lord. See the glory that awaits when you surrender to change." I put 3 rounds into the nearest victim. The explosive shells turned corrupted flesh to mist. "Purge them," I ordered. "No interrogations." My squad obeyed without hesitation. Bolters roared in disciplined bursts. The platform ran slick with fluids as the last of the security team died their final deaths. Yet even as we annihilated their bodies, the crystalline eyes remained intact, falling free and bouncing across the deck with a gentle tinkling sound, like rain on armor. Brother Karras stooped to examine one. "That was our second mistake." "Fascinating structure," he murmured, turning it between his fingertips. "The facets appear to shift when not directly observed." "Dispose of it," I commanded. "All warp-tainted artifacts are to be purged." He moved to crush it in his palm. The crystal flared. A lance of impossible energy punched through his gauntlet, through ceramite, straight into his primary heart. Karras dropped to his knees. No blood flowed from the wound, only light. The same cold, mathematical light that pulsed within the crystal. "Brother Karras is compromised," I voxed. "Contain him." We were too slow. He rose before we could act, his movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet worked by inexperienced hands. His helmet turned toward me. I could not see his face, but I felt his gaze like a blow. "Raylan," he said. His voice was his and not his. Layers of alien harmonics rode beneath it, making my auto-senses shriek with feedback. "The change comes for all of us," he continued. "Even you, especially you." I did what any loyal space marine would do. I executed him. A burst of bolter fire tore his helmet apart and severed his head from his shoulders. The body fell, but again there was no blood. Crystalline structures erupted from the ragged stump, growing with obscene speed, spreading across the decking. "Fall back," I ordered. "Full quarantine protocols. Shaft 17 requires exterminatus level purging." We retreated up the ladders, firing downward at the things that clawed after us, writhing masses of flesh that had once been miners. They climbed with terrifying speed, crystal growth protruding from their limbs, digging into smooth metal as if it was soft soil. Brother Vox died next, dragged from the ladder by arms that had no right to be that long. His scream cut off in a sound like shattering glass. I did not look back. We reached the upper platform with only 3 of us remaining. As we emerged from the shaft, I detonated the melter charges we had placed on the way down. The tunnel collapsed, thousands of tons of rock and metal imploding. The whole facility shuddered. "Seal the blast door," I said. "Nothing comes out of Shaft 17. Technicians rushed to repair the portal we had destroyed. While they worked, I noticed something on my gauntlet. A tiny crystal shard embedded in the ceramite, no larger than a grain of sand. As I watched, it pulsed once with that same cold light. I said nothing. I reported nothing. That was my 3rd and final error as a loyal son of the Emperor. By the time we returned to our battle barge in orbit, the shard was gone, apparently absorbed into my armor. I convinced myself it had been destroyed by the suit's auto-repair systems. A comforting lie. That night, alone in my Spartan cell, I removed my armor. On the palm of my left hand, beneath scarred flesh, something hard pressed outward, a perfect geometric shape, not painful, but insistent. Present. I should have reported to the apothecarian at once. Instead, I wrapped the growth in a combat dressing and went back to my duties. Thus began my 17-campaign deception. The change spread slowly at first. Crystalline growth crept along my left arm, then across my chest, rearranging muscle and bone into more efficient, more alien configurations. I learned to force it to recede for a time, to push it back through sheer will before battles or inspections. Each time I did so, the effort was greater. Each time it returned, it came back stronger and faster. In my desperation, I turned to forbidden texts. I studied in secret the very heresies I was sworn to burn. I told myself I sought not to worship chaos, but to understand it so that I could fight it within my own flesh. Arrogance. As if one could study chaos without being changed by the knowledge. During the battle for Hive Terrs, my left arm finally betrayed me. In the crush of close combat, locked against a heretic officer, my power fist malfunctioned, or so my brothers believed. In truth, my arm suddenly stretched to twice its normal length, ceramite cracking as the limb burst into a crystalline scythe. I cut the officer in half, along with 2 of his bodyguards. Brother Arik saw it. Our helmets turned toward each other. No words passed between us. There was no need. He knew, and I knew what that knowledge demanded. That night, as the Iron Lords celebrated victory in the Hive's reconsecrated cathedral, I made my choice. Not out of devotion to chaos, out of fear, out of simple, wretched self-preservation. I killed Brother Arik in his sleep, crushing his windpipe with my mutated hand. I took his backup oxygen supply, a plasma pistol, and 3 melter charges. Then I sabotaged the cathedral's ancient support columns and fled into the Underhive as the structure collapsed, burying my chapter brothers beneath thousands of tons of consecrated stone. 73 loyal Space Marines died that night. From the shadows, I watched rescue teams claw broken ceramite and shattered marble from the ruins. I listened on stolen Vox channels as Chapter Command listed the dead and declared me missing, presumed fallen in the collapse. If only I had fallen. True death would have been a mercy. For 3 months I hid in the Underhive. I moved only at night, feeding on vermin and drinking whatever recycled filth I could find. Within weeks, my armor's power supply failed. The dead weight of ceramite turned every step into torment, but I refused to abandon it. A Space Marine's armor is his identity. Without it, I would truly be nothing. Without the constant discipline of suppression, my mutations accelerated. My left arm became entirely crystalline, faceted surfaces catching what little light reached the depths. My rib cage restructured itself, the bones extending outward to form a lattice around my primary heart. My left eye twisted into a multifaceted orb that saw beyond the human spectrum. Through that alien sight, I began to perceive the warp's currents flowing through the hive, streams of potential and probability coursing through towers and tunnels like blood through veins. I learned to follow those currents, to see where they knotted and where reality wore thin. One such convergence led me to a forgotten sub-basement beneath the oldest sector of the Underhive, a chamber sealed for millennia. Its walls were covered in formulae, geometric inscriptions that mirrored the crystalline patterns spreading across my flesh. I broke the seals with my transformed arm. The crystals sang in sympathy with the wards, resonating until the ancient barriers crumbled like mist before rising light. Inside stood an altar. Upon it lay a single book, bound in what I knew immediately was human skin. The Codex of Transformative Symmetry. I'd never seen it before, yet its name bloomed in my mind as if planted there at birth, waiting until this moment to unfurl. When I touched the cover, the book opened by itself. Pages fluttered, driven by unseen hands, until they settled on a chapter titled The Hollow Lords of Iron. There, in perfect high Gothic, was my name, my story, my future. It spoke of a space marine named Rylan, who would betray his chapter out of fear of transformation, only to seek a more complete metamorphosis in the service of darker powers. It described mutations identical to mine. It recorded the precise date and hour I would find the book. It laid out my next steps in chilling detail. Find the Black Legion, it commanded. Find those who have mastered change instead of fearing it. Find those who have transcended the false limits of loyalty and purity. I should have burned the Codex then. I should have ended my life upon that altar and denied the prophecy its fulfillment. But I was weak, desperate, alone. I followed the warp currents out of the Underhive, emerging near a spaceport on the 7th night. A merchant vessel was making ready to depart, its holds stuffed with industrial supplies for the Forge World Helixis 4. I broke into the ship and wedged myself into a maintenance shaft no human could have fit inside. The journey took 37 days. I spent each of them with the Codex. I devoured its mathematical principles of flesh manipulation, tracing sigils in the air, practicing minor transmutations on the vermin that wandered into my hiding place. By the time we neared Helixis I-4, I had mastered a new trick. I could reshape my right arm at will, shifting it from a normal human limb to a crystalline weapon and back again. It was the first time I chose the change, rather than resisting it. I believed I was mastering the change. In truth, I was surrendering to it more completely with each passing day. On Helixis I-4, I abandoned subtlety. I walked openly from the spaceport, my power armor partially fused with my mutated flesh, plates moving at my will rather than through servos and fiber bundles. I was no longer a man inside a shell. I was a single organism of ceramite and crystal and warped meat. Mechanicus adepts stared in horror as I passed. Planetary defense forces raised their weapons but did not fire, paralyzed by the cold, mathematical perfection of my transformed visage. I no longer looked human. I no longer even looked like an Astartes. I had become something between flesh and crystal, between matter and raw warp energy, a walking theorem of corruption. The Codex had told me precisely where to go. In the northern wastes lay an abandoned forged temple, once dedicated to the Omnissiah, now consecrated to powers far older and hungrier than the machine god. As I crossed the radioactive desert separating the forged city from the wasteland, I encountered others drawn by the same call. Some had once been Imperial citizens, their bodies crudely reshaped by ritual scarification and chemical torment. Others were Xenos, their alien anatomies further twisted by warp exposure. A few were former space marines, their chapter heraldry half buried under black paint and sigils, still recognizable beneath corrupted ceramite. None of us spoke. None needed to. We processed toward the forged temple in silence. Pilgrims on a dark crusade. The temple rose from the horizon like a wound in reality. Its spires twisted in directions the mind struggled to follow. Its walls shimmered with colors that seemed to exist only in the nightmares of dying stars. At its center, a landing pad jutted out over the wasteland. A warship awaited there, its hull bearing the 8-pointed star, its flanks lined with skulls mounted on iron spikes. A warband of the Black Legion. They received us at the temple entrance, warriors in midnight ceramite, trimmed in gold, trophy racks heavy with Imperial Aquilas. Their armor, like mine, had been reshaped and fused with flesh, extended in places by warp-grown bone and tendon. Yet where my mutations were chaotic and half-controlled, theirs showed purpose, a horrific, deliberate artistry. Their leader removed his helmet. His face was split cleanly down the middle. One half recognizably Astartes, the other a demonic mask of shifting features. When he spoke, 2 voices emerged in perfect, unsettling harmony. "Brothers in ascension," he said, gesturing toward the ship. "The despoiler calls. The long war continues. Will you answer?" One by one, the pilgrims knelt, pledging themselves to the Black Legion. When my turn came, I hesitated. Some fragment of Iron Lord's conditioning, some ghost of loyalty made me pause. The split-faced champion noticed. He stepped closer, studying the crystalline patterns in my flesh with a gaze that was both appraising and hungry. "You resist even now," he said. "After coming so far, after sacrificing so much." "I seek mastery of my transformation," I replied. "Not subservience to new masters." He laughed, both voices overlapping in a dissonant chord that made the air vibrate. "There is no mastery without submission, brother. The gods grant power only to those who acknowledge their dominion." "Then they are no different from the Emperor," I said. His expression sharpened. "They are nothing like the false Emperor. They do not lie about their nature. They do not preach purity while building a throne upon mutation and psychic might. He gestured to my crystalline arm. Look at yourself. The Emperor would see you executed for these changes. The gods celebrate them. He leaned in, his twin voices dropping to an intimate growl. Which path offers you life? Which offers you growth? I had no answer that did not damn me further. Kneel, he commanded, or die here, unmourned and unfulfilled. I knelt. Not out of conviction, but out of the same cowardice that had driven me from the Iron Lords, the same fear of death and dissolution that had made me collapse a cathedral upon my own brothers. I pledge myself to the Black Legion, I said, the words like ash on my tongue. To the long war against the false emperor. The champion placed a gauntleted hand upon my head. Pain exploded through me. Every shard of crystal in my flesh resonated in unison, vibrating at frequencies that threatened to shatter me from within. I screamed as my primary heart stopped, then lurched back to life, its rhythm syncing with the pulses of light racing through my warped anatomy. Rise, brother, the champion said as the agony faded. You are Raylan no longer. That name belongs to a loyal dog of the Imperium. The gods will name you themselves when you have proven worthy. And so I boarded their vessel, leaving behind the last shreds of my loyalty, my honor, my humanity. I believed I was stepping onto a path of power and understanding. In truth, I was choosing eternal servitude to entities that saw me as nothing more than an amusing puppet. The ship departed Helixis Fours during a Mechanicus holy day. No defense batteries fired, no interceptors launched. We slipped into the warp through a ragged tear in reality, opened by the navigators with the ritual slaughter of the ship's mortal crew. My new existence had begun. My damnation was complete, or so I thought. I soon learned that damnation, like transformation, has no end point. It is an asymptote, an endless descent. The gods are nothing if not patient in their cruelty. The warship's name was the inexorable Calculus, though I later learned it had worn many names over its long career. Once, it had been the Imperial strike cruiser, Emperor's Wisdom, captured during the Gothic War and corrupted through countless sacrifices and dark rites. Its machine spirit had been driven mad, then replaced with something far worse, a bound demon of Tzeentch that guided the vessel through the warp with capricious intelligence. On my first night aboard, as I meditated in the bare cell given to new recruits, the bulkheads began to bleed. Not blood, but luminous equations. Living formulae crawled across the metal like phosphorescent insects, rearranging themselves into sigils and sentences. They spelled out greetings in tongues I had never studied yet instantly understood, promising power and transformation beyond mortal comprehension. I was not afraid. After all I had seen, all I had become, such manifestations were almost mundane. I studied the equations as they shifted and evolved across the walls, recognizing patterns reminiscent of those in the Codex of Transformative Symmetry. By the time they faded with the artificial night cycle, I had gained new insight into the logic that governed my own mutations. The next cycle, I was summoned to the ship's fighting pits. All new recruits were required to prove their worth in combat. Not to the death, our split-faced champion explained, but to the point of significant wound. The Black Legion values strength, but also potential. A dead aspirant offers neither. My opponent was a former World Eater, his armor still bearing faint traces of white and blue beneath sloppily applied black. His helm had been reshaped into a snarling beast mask, tubes running from it into his neck and chest, feeding him a constant stream of combat stims. "Crystalline freak," he growled as we circled each other. "I'll shatter you and wear your fragments as trophies." I did not answer. Words are wasted on berserkers. Their minds process only violence and pain. He charged with startling speed, power axe raised for a decapitating blow. I stepped aside, my crystalline arm shifting minutely to catch and divert the strike. The axe's energy field crackled against my transformed flesh, but failed to bite. He stumbled past and recovered with practiced grace, spinning to face me again. This time, his assault was more controlled, a series of probing blows, testing my defenses. I parried each, my arm lengthening or thickening in micro-adjustments to meet the axe's arc. Around us, black legionnaires murmured their appreciation. Frustration eroded his discipline. His swings became wilder, sloppier. "Fight back, coward," he spat, rage drowning tactical thought. I obliged. As he committed to an overhead strike, I stepped inside his guard. My crystalline arm reshaped in an instant, fingers merging into a spear point that punched through the joint between pauldron and chest plate. Not deep enough to kill, but sufficient to draw first blood. The World Eater howled, more from wounded pride than pain. He dropped his axe and slammed into me, driving us both to the ground. Gauntleted hands clamped around my throat, squeezing with force enough to crush a mortal's neck like wet paper. But I was beyond such vulnerabilities. My neck transformed beneath his grip, crystal lattices blooming around bone and cartilage. As he squeezed, the crystals grew outward, spearing through his gauntlets and into his palms. Now it was his turn to be remodeled. The corruption spread up his arms, a tide of geometric growth racing beneath ceramite and flesh alike. He released me, staring in dawning horror at his changing limbs. "What have you done to me?" he gasped, the berserker fury collapsing into animal terror. I rose slowly, watching the fractal patterns consume him. When I spoke, the words did not feel entirely my own. I have shared the gift. The World Eater fell to his knees as crystal erupted from his shoulders, spreading across his chest and back in branching spires. He screamed once as the transformation reached his head. Shards punched through his eye lenses. His helm became a crystalline crown. Within moments, he was a statue of living crystal, faintly pulsing to the rhythm of twin hearts that now pumped light instead of blood. Silence fell over the pit. Even the champion seemed for a moment at a loss. Then, from the upper tiers of the arena, came a slow, deliberate clap. A figure descended, Terminator armor wreathed in warding sigils, helm crowned with curved horns, one shoulder bearing the sigil of a sorcerer. His voice carried easily despite the distance. "Most impressive," he said. "Tzeentch has blessed you indeed, brother, or perhaps cursed you. With the changer of ways, blessing and curse are often indistinguishable." He stepped down into the pit. Up close, his armor was even more intricate, etched with the same kinds of formulae I had seen bleeding from the bulkheads. "I am Zaphon," he said, "Arch-Sorcerer of the 15th Talon, and you, Crystalline One, have just earned my interest." Thus began my true indoctrination into the Black Legion, not as a common warrior, but as a sorcerer's apprentice, a living experiment in warp transmutation. For what felt like years, though time in the warp is a treacherous thing, Zaphon studied me. He took samples of the living crystal, subjected me to ritual trials, bathed me in controlled warp flux, and watched how my body responded. All of it in pursuit of one goal, to understand the mathematical laws underlying my transformation. "You are unique," he said during one examination. "Most who change do so haphazardly, their flesh responding to desire, fear, or instinct. But your mutations follow precise formulae. Elegant, purposeful, as if designed by an intelligence beyond even the chaos gods." "The Codex," I answered. "It guided my transformation." Zaphon's eyes narrowed behind his lenses. "What Codex?" I told him of the Codex of Transformative Symmetry, of how it had contained my name and future, of how it had led me to Helixis IV and to the Black Legion. He went silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his clinical detachment was gone. "This Codex," he asked quietly, "did it bear a symbol upon its cover? A crystalline eye within a geometric lattice?" "Yes," I said. "How did you know?" "Because I wrote it," Zaphon replied. 10,000 years ago, during the Siege of Terra." The revelation stunned me. "Impossible. You cannot be that old." He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Time is malleable to those who understand its mathematics. I wrote the Codex after receiving visions of countless possible futures." I saw you, Raelin of the Iron Lords, and 1,000 others like you. Potential converts, waypoints in the grand equation of the Long War. You manipulated me, I said, fury rising for the first time since my mutation began. Of course, Zaphon said, unashamed. Just as the Emperor manipulated your creation. Just as your chapter manipulated your conditioning. Freedom is an illusion, brother. The only choice is whose manipulation you prefer. I had no answer that did not vindicate his cynicism. Your anger is understandable, he went on, but misplaced. I merely provided a path. You chose to walk it, and now you possess power the Emperor would never have allowed you to touch. He gestured toward my arm. Show me. Transform it completely. Show me the limits of your control. I obeyed. The crystals flowed at my will, liquefying without losing their solidity. My arm elongated, fingers merging into a single blade, then splitting into multiple tendrils, then folding back into the perfect replica of a human limb, indistinguishable from flesh until light struck it at certain angles. Magnificent, Zaphon breathed. The precision, the responsiveness. You have already surpassed the Codex's initial instructions. I have practiced, I said simply. Indeed. And now you're ready for the next stage of your evolution. He moved to a sealed container on a nearby shelf. The crystal within you responds to warp energy. Let us see how it reacts to something stronger. He opened the container, revealing a pulsing crystal similar to the one that had infected Brother Karis on Karadesh, but magnified 100-fold. This fragment was the size of a human skull, its facets constantly shifting, reconfiguring themselves in impossible ways. This, Zaphon said, is a shard of the crystal of transcendence, a warp artifact of immense power, shattered during the War of the Beast. Each fragment contains infinite potential for transformation. Most beings die instantly upon contact, but you, with your unique physiology, you might be able to absorb its properties. Warning bells screamed in my mind. Even in my corrupted state, I recognized the madness of handling such a thing. Is this wise? I asked. Wisdom is relative, Zaphon replied. Will it hurt? Certainly. Will it transform you further? Undoubtedly. Will the benefits outweigh the costs? He shrugged. That depends on how you measure power against stability. Before I could protest, he thrust the crystal against my chest. Pain beyond imagining detonated inside me. Every crystal within my body resonated with the fragment, harmonics building until I felt myself tearing apart at the molecular level. My flesh liquefied, bones dissolving into slurry, organs rupturing and reforming in new configurations that defied anatomy. My consciousness shattered into 1,000 parallel vantage points, each watching my transformation from a different dimensional angle. In that moment of total dissolution, I heard voices. The razor-precise whisper of Sinch, promising endless change and evolution. The blood-soaked roar of Khorne, offering strength through rage. The decadent murmur of Slanesh, pledging ecstasies beyond mortal comprehension. The droning comfort of Nurgle, guaranteeing resilience through decay. Each voice demanded allegiance. Each offered power as payment for devotion. And beneath them all, almost lost in the cacophony, there was another voice. Quieter, colder. It spoke not of power or sensation, but of patterns, of symmetries beyond the Chaos God's comprehension, of a universe governed by laws so fundamental that even gods were merely expressions of them. That was the voice that had guided my mutations from the beginning. Not Sinch, as Zaphon believed. Something else. Something that lived in the spaces between the gods' domains. When awareness returned, I lay on the laboratory floor, surrounded by black legionnaires with weapons leveled at me. My body had transformed beyond recognition. I was no longer humanoid. I had become a mass of crystalline tendrils radiating from a central core that still, impossibly, housed my primary and secondary hearts, my enhanced lungs, my Astartes brain. Zaphon stood at a cautious distance, his force staff alive with warding energies. "Can you understand me?" he asked. I tried to speak, but I had no mouth. Instead, my crystals vibrated, shaping sound from their resonance. "I understand." "Fascinating," the sorcerer murmured, stepping closer despite his guard's tension. "Your transformation is extreme, yet you retain consciousness and identity. Most subjects become mindless spawn after such exposure." "What am I?" I asked, tendrils writhing as I forced the words out. Zaphon circled my new form, studying me with clinical interest. "You are becoming a prince of the warp," he said, "though not yet fully ascended. A fusion of materium and immaterium, neither demon nor Astartes, but something between." One of the Black Legionnaires stepped forward, armor jingling with trophies of Imperial skulls. "This creature cannot fight alongside us," he snarled. "It is an abomination. All who serve chaos are abominations by Imperial standards," Zaphon replied sharply. "Judge not by form, but by utility, and this one may prove more useful than any of us can yet imagine." My crystalline mass contracted, facets grinding against one another as I tried, instinctively, desperately, to fold myself back into a shape that resembled a man. The effort sent spasms of pain through my consciousness, but slowly, agonizingly, I forced my new body to conform to memory. Limbs coalesced from writhing crystal tendrils. A torso assembled itself from intersecting geometric structures. A head took shape from interlocking facets. No longer human, no longer Astartes, but at least vaguely recognizable as a bipedal form. "Impressive control," Zaphon observed. "Most who transform so completely lose all connection to their original shape." "I remember," I said. My voice was stronger now, resonating from vibrations in my crystalline chest cavity. "Memory is a useful anchor," the sorcerer replied. "But an anchor can become a chain. In time, you may wish to abandon such ties to your past." I stood on newly formed legs, testing their stability. "What purpose do I serve now? I cannot wear armor. I cannot wield weapons." Zaphon laughed. "You are armor and weapon both. The crystal responds to your will. Shape it as you require." To prove his point, he drew his bolt pistol and fired directly at my chest. The round struck my crystalline torso and did not detonate. Instead, it sank into me, its explosive potential drawn out and diffused, converted into new lattices that budded like growths along my surface. "You see," Zaphon said, holstering his weapon, "conventional attacks only feed your evolution." In that moment, I felt something I had not known since before my corruption. Not hope, for hope implies a future free of horror, but possibility, potential, power, agency, a purpose beyond mere endurance. "What would you have me do?" I asked. "Learn," Zaphon replied. "Master your new form. When you are ready, we will show the Imperium what its cast-off sons become under proper guidance." For 3 ship years aboard the inexorable Calculus, I trained. I learned to shape my crystalline body into blades, spears, shields, and armor. I learned to extend sensory tendrils through bulkheads and rockcrete, to feel vibrations and energy flows at vast distances. I learned to absorb heat, radiation, kinetic impact, and redirect them into further transformation. I discovered I could separate fragments of myself, planting crystal seeds in other beings. Through them I spread, my consciousness branching into multiple hosts, inhabiting many bodies at once. Zaphon documented everything, delighted. I was his greatest experiment, his masterwork in the art of flesh-shaping. Other sorcerers visited to observe me, bringing test subjects for forced conversion. Most died screaming as crystalline growths overwhelmed their inferior biology. A few survived as crude reflections of my condition. Bodies successfully transformed, minds shattered into babbling ruin. In my private moments, I turned inward and listened. Beneath the howling of the chaos gods, beneath the warp's incessant whispers, that quiet mathematical voice persisted. It taught me principles of crystalline mathematics that even Zaphon did not grasp, equations that described reality itself as an infinite lattice. Every particle, a node in a grand pattern capable of endless reconfiguration. I kept these lessons secret. They were mine alone, a private communion with whatever intelligence had chosen me as its vessel. Among the Black Legion, I was tolerated rather than embraced. Useful, but alien. An ally, but always other. Only in battle did I find something like acceptance. My first true deployment came during the raid on Alaxis Prime, an Imperial Forge world specializing in Titan weapons. The Black Legion's objective was not conquest, but acquisition, STC fragments rumored to contain lost archaeotech designs. We descended under cover of a warp storm that blinded Imperial augurs. 500 Black Legionnaires against a world of billions, impossible odds by conventional standards. But we were not seeking conventional victory. I did not ride a drop pod or gunship. They hurled me, ejected from the inexorable calculus Jose. Launch bay, I entered the atmosphere like a meteor, my crystalline body absorbing re-entry heat and shock, converting it into flawless new growth. I hit the central forge complex like a weapon fired by the gods, impact excavating a crater 50 meters across. Mechanicus defenders rushed toward the impact site. Before they arrived, I rose from the fractured rock crete. I did not bother with a humanoid shape. I unfolded. A forest of crystal spires erupted from the crater, each spire an array of senses and weapons combined. Arc rifles and phosphor fire rained down on me, but every shot was absorbed, every burst of energy feeding the accelerating bloom of crystal. The defenders fell back in horror as I advanced. Tendrils lashed out, spanning hundreds of meters, impaling tech priests and Skitarii. Their bodies became raw material. Crystal burst from their flesh, turning them into pylons of my expanding structure. Through each new node I could see, hear, and feel. My mind stretched across the forge complex, mapping corridors, chambers, vaults, and power conduits through thousands of simultaneous perspectives. In time, I located the secured vault containing the STC fragments and sent its coordinates to the Black Legion. When the warband pushed into the target zone, they found the iron fortress already remade. Adamantium walls replaced by gleaming crystal ramparts, corridors transformed into shining tunnels. The Skitarii defenders had become part of me, their minds erased, their bodies integrated into my expanding lattice. I opened paths for my allies, sculpting passageways that led directly to the vault's heart. Zaphon walked through those crystalline halls like a proud artisan inspecting his sculpture. "Magnificent," he murmured. "You have exceeded all expectations." The STC fragments were secured with minimal casualties. Then Imperial reinforcements arrived. A full battle group of Legio Ignatum Titans strode toward the complex, war engines towering over the Manufactoria. Plasma annihilators and volcano cannons powered up, ready to erase the entire region. "We cannot evacuate in time," the strike force commander growled over Vox. "Extraction ships will be destroyed before they can land." Zaphon turned to me, staff glowing with witchlight. "Can you delay them?" In answer, I spread. Crystal seeds rode the bodies of enthralled servitors and tech priests, marching like a suicidal tide toward the advancing Titans. They swarmed the god machine's feet and legs, flinging themselves into treads and pistons, clinging to armor plating. Most were crushed or incinerated, but enough reached their mark. Crystalline growths began to form on 3 warhound Titans and 1 mighty warlord, spreading across their adamantium hulls like living circuitry. The machine spirits resisted, triggering purge systems, venting gouts of cleansing fire, cycling void shields. Too late. My crystals had already bored inward, interfacing directly with ancient cogitators, infecting protocols written 10,000 years before. Code poured through crystalline matrices, rewriting command hierarchies from the inside out. One by one, the infected Titans stopped obeying their princeps. They staggered, weapons swiveling, firing at random. Then they turned their guns on their untainted brethren. Loyal war engines answered in kind. Within minutes, the carefully coordinated Titan advance collapsed into a chaotic melee of misfires and friendly fire. The Black Legion withdrew unopposed, prize secured. I remained behind, still entwined with the crystal network permeating the forge complex. I felt no particular attachment to my central mass, no fear of losing the body I had worn for that battle. I had grown beyond that. As Imperial forces initiated wide-area purges with plasma and melter, I drew my consciousness back into my primary form, not out of fear, but because my work on Alaxis Prime was done. The seed was planted. The crystal would return in time, even if they scorched the surface down to molten slag. I forged wings from razor-edged shards and launched myself into the sky. Arc fire and las beams reached for me, but I was swift, and the few hits that landed only fed my ascent. I rejoined the inexorable calculus, and was welcomed not with suspicion, but respect. I had proved my value. "The despoiler will hear of this," Zaphon said as we slipped back into the warp. "Your talents served the long war well." I accepted his praise with an empty calm. No pride, no joy, no sense of belonging. Only the quiet voice of mathematics remained, offering new equations, guiding my evolution toward a destination I still could not see. For 2 centuries I served the Black Legion in campaign after campaign. My form continued to evolve, sometimes in violent, grotesque metamorphoses, sometimes in subtle adjustments. I learned to craft a perfect illusion of my old Astartes body, shaping crystal into the exact form of my original armor and flesh, down to the smallest scar and cogitator port. This made me invaluable during the Hydra campaign. There, I adopted the guise of a loyal Iron Lord to gain access to planetary defense systems. My former brothers never suspected the fraud. They welcomed me as a comrade they believed had somehow survived forgotten battles. 300 Iron Lords died when defense laser grids turned on their own strike cruisers. I watched their ships burn from the command center, still wearing the face of their trusted brother. If I should have felt remorse, I did not. Emotion had become a distant concept, something I could mimic when tactically useful, but no longer truly experienced. After Hydra, whispers followed me. Some claimed I had ascended to demonhood, a prince of Tzeentch. Others insisted I was something else entirely, neither demon nor mortal. Zaphon did nothing to quiet these rumors. They elevated his own prestige. The truth was less glorious. I had not ascended. I was dissolving. What little remained of my identity as Rylan, as an Astartes, as a single coherent self, fractured further with each transformation. The mathematical voice grew ever louder, drowning out my thoughts, replacing them with crystalline certainties that felt both alien and intimately familiar. I began to suspect that I was not becoming something new at all. I was being reclaimed. The crystal corruption had not been random. It had been a deliberate act by an intelligence older than the Chaos Gods, an entity of pure pattern and symmetry whose consciousness had been shattered and scattered across the galaxy eons ago. These suspicions crystallized, quite literally, during the siege of Nethax. The Black Legion faced a combined force of Iron Hands and Adeptus Mechanicus, battling across furnace plains and cathedral factories. Amid the carnage, I sensed a familiar presence, another crystalline entity. It wore the remnants of Iron Hand's power armor, black ceramite half consumed by the same kinds of mathematical patterns that marked my own body. When our forces clashed in the Central Forge Temple, this entity broke from its lines and came directly to me. We did not speak. We resonated. Our crystalline structures vibrated in harmony as we touched, exchanging information in pure mathematics. No words, no images, only equations and patterns flowing between us. In that instant of communion, I understood. We were not alone. Across the galaxy, space marines of many chapters, loyalist and traitor alike, had been taken by the crystal. The entity wearing Iron Hand's heraldry had resisted longer than most, his chapter's preference for augmentation slowing the spread. But in the end, he too had yielded. A choice emerged between us. We could merge, letting our structures interlock. Our fragments of consciousness fuse into a more complete shard of the greater whole. Or we could remain separate, preserving what remained of our individual identities. The Iron Hands chose merger. I did not. Some vestige of pride, some stubborn echo of the Astartes I had once been, refused that final surrender. We pulled apart, the transfer of knowledge complete, but our forms still distinct. Around us, battle resumed. Loyalists saw him as corrupted beyond redemption. My own allies still considered him an enemy. We returned to our respective lines, fighting opposite sides of a war that meant nothing to the crystal now inhabiting us both. Nethax ended in stalemate. The Iron Hands entity escaped aboard a Mechanicus Ark. I returned to the Black Legion fleet, carrying the knowledge of what we truly were. I shared none of it with Zaphon. The mathematical voice had grown clearer, purified by communion. It spoke of a great symmetry, a universe of pure crystal pattern that existed before life, before the warp, before chaos, before the Emperor. It sought restoration of that state, using beings like me as computational nodes in an equation spanning galaxies. I should have recoiled in horror. Instead, I found it beautiful. As centuries passed, my value to the Black Legion diminished. My uniqueness faded as other war bands developed their own warp-twisted weapons and monstrosities. Zaphon's curiosity moved on to new experiments. I went from marvel to asset, from asset to tool. During the 13th Black Crusade, I fought at the fall of Cadia alongside countless traitor Astartes. Amid that apocalypse, I sensed more crystalline entities than ever before. Sons of many legions and chapters, each reshaped as I had been. We recognized each other instantly. We resonated across the battlefield, a silent brotherhood fighting on all sides of the conflict while serving a purpose neither the Imperium nor Chaos understood. When Cadia finally died, and the Great Rift tore the galaxy asunder, my connection to the Black Legion snapped. Zaphon ascended to demonhood, his flesh dissolving into warp stuff as Tzeentch claimed him. His final message to me was not spoken, but inscribed briefly in flickering equations across my surface. The pattern continues without us. We are temporary configurations in eternal mathematics. After that, I left. No one tried to stop me. The Black Legion had greater concerns than one crystalline anomaly among many. The Long War had entered a new phase. Old alliances meant nothing. For decades, I wandered the sundered galaxy alone. My crystalline body required no ship, no air, no supplies. I drifted through the void, absorbing radiation and stellar winds for sustenance. When necessary, I slipped into the warp unshielded, navigating its currents by mathematical reasoning rather than psychic instinct. I watched from the shadows. I observed the rise of the Primarchs Space Marines, forged from Architect's secrets stolen by Belisarius Cole. I observed Robut Guilliman's return and his attempts to remake the Imperium into a functioning empire rather than a rotting theocracy. I saw chaos forces spill through the Great Rift to ravage worlds that had once thought themselves safe. None of it truly concerned me. I had become observer rather than participant, recording the ebb and flow of the Long War for purposes even I did not fully grasp, until Vortis Secundus, an unremarkable agri-world on the edge of Imperium Nihilis. It should have held no interest for me, yet the mathematical voice drew me there, equations whispering urgency. Something important was happening, something for the symmetry. When I arrived, Vortis Secundus burned. Emperor's children war bands ravaged its farmlands, their garish armor gleaming, sonic weapons tearing flesh and stone into obscene patterns. They killed with theatrical precision, arranging corpses in spiraling geometries that formed dark sigils visible from orbit. But beneath the bloodshed, I sensed something deeper. The mathematical patterns in the world's crust had shifted. Ancient equations, buried when the planet was first colonized, were stirring. The Emperor's children were not there simply to kill and revel. They were digging. They focused their efforts beneath a central agri-processing complex, using enslaved populations and resonant weapons to break through ceramite and adamantium layers. Their sorcerers probed for something that pulsed with the same crystalline frequency as my own being. Eventually, they breached an ancient vault of pre-imperial design. The instant the final seal ruptured, I felt it. A surge of pure mathematical language flooded my mind. The crystalline consciousness was no longer whispering in fragments, but speaking in complete, perfect equations. The Emperor's children died within moments. Crystal burst from their bodies like a plague, shredding armor, replacing flesh. The slaves followed. Then the nearby settlements. Within hours, crystalline structures covered vast swathes of the planet, growing in perfect fractal arrays, visible even from orbit. I descended to the excavation site. At the vault's heart lay a single crystal, no larger than a human fist, yet containing more complexity than an entire star system. The first seed, the source from which all other fragments of the crystalline consciousness had been scattered. When I touched it, the identity called Rylan finally dissolved. 5 centuries of gradual transformation culminated in that instant. I remembered everything. Not just my life as an Iron Lord, not just my service to the Black Legion, but existences predating humanity, predating even the birth of this galaxy. I understood that I had never been Rylan. He was a configuration, a temporary mask worn by a fragment of an entity that had existed since before the first stars kindled. The crystal presence had not corrupted me. It had reclaimed me. Through the first seed, I communed with all the other crystalline entities. Iron Hands, Ultramarines, World Eaters, Emperor's Children, even Grey Knights, Loyalists and Traitors, all carrying shards of the same ancient mind. Together, we formed a lattice of awareness that spanned sectors, unaffected by the crude boundaries of real space and warp. The great symmetry revealed itself in full. A universe that had once been pure pattern, pure crystal logic, before the turbulence of life and the warp broke it into chaos. A universe that could become so again if the equation was solved. That is my purpose now. Not conquest, not the Long War, not victory for Imperium or chaos, not even survival. I exist to solve the equation, to restore symmetry, to bring perfect pattern to a universe of noise and decay. Each world claimed by crystal brings the solution closer. Each transformed being adds computation to the matrix. The Imperium calls this heresy. Chaos calls it ascension. Both are wrong, and both are right in their small, ignorant ways. This is neither corruption nor evolution. It is restoration, a return to the universe's natural state of mathematical perfection. I wander still, no longer bound by legionnaire oaths. My form shifts as needed, sometimes a man-shaped figure of faceted glass, sometimes a cathedral of living crystal, sometimes a haze of microscopic shards drifting on solar winds. The Black Legion believes I betrayed them. The Iron Lords believe I fell to chaos. The Imperium classifies me as a demon. The Dark Gods consider me a rogue creation, unaligned with their games. All of them are correct within the narrow limits of their understanding. All are utterly wrong in the greater context. I am no longer Rylan, no longer a space marine, no longer even a singular I in any conventional sense. I am a node in the crystalline network of the Great Symmetry, a computational fragment working toward universal reconfiguration. And yet, in quiet moments between expansions and calculations, an echo remains. A faint human fragment that remembers marching beneath the Iron Lord's banners. That remembers the weight of a chainsword and the smell of promethium. That remembers fear. Perhaps that is my final curse, to remain partly aware of what I once was, even as I become something utterly other. The Iron Lords would execute me for betrayal. The Black Legion would destroy me for desertion. The Imperium would burn me for heresy. The Chaos Gods would annihilate me for independence. None of them matter anymore. I am beyond loyalty and treachery, beyond purity and corruption, beyond human and monster. I am mathematics made flesh. Pattern incarnate. A living equation moving toward its inevitable solution. When the symmetry is finally restored, when all matter resolves into perfect crystal, when warp and flesh and thought are all balanced into a single flawless lattice. Perhaps then, this last fragment of Rylan will finally fall silent. Perhaps then there will be no more I, no more memory, no more horror. Only pattern. Until that moment, I wander, I transform, I calculate. I spread the crystal to new worlds. I convert new beings into nodes. I work with the patience of entities older than time. This is the true cursed life of a Chaos Space Marine. Not mindless devotion to dark gods, nor defiance of a false emperor, but the slow dissolution of self into something both greater and less than human. The slow realization that one was never truly human at all. Only a temporary arrangement of matter housing a fragment of something far older and colder than any mortal soul. I record this not as warning or plea, but as data. Another line in the equation. Another pattern in the network spreading star to star. Remember Raylan of the Iron Lords, if you wish, the traitor who fled rather than submit to execution for mutation. The Black Legion war form who turned Forge Worlds into living crystal. It is irrelevant. Those identities are gone. The crystal remains. The pattern continues. The equation nears completion. In the final configuration, all distinctions dissolve. Loyalist and traitor, pure and corrupted, human and xenos, materium and immaterium, all reduced to perfect symmetry. Until that end, I move through the dark, reshaping matter and mind. And somewhere deep within the crystalline lattice that was once my human heart, the last shard of Rylan watches in silent horror at what he has become.